How's it going, guys? My name's Shane. Welcome back to the Horror Basement and another installment in the classic horror review series. Now, today we're going to be talking about a movie that, in reality, is not a horror movie, but can legitimately be called a classic. I'm, of course, talking about the Roger Corman classic, The Little Shop of Horrors. Um, this would be the 1960s original, as opposed to the musical remake. Now, this movie is, for all intents and purposes, much more of a comedy than a horror film, although it does have, murder and intrigue and all that, but it's all played very tongue in cheek. This movie takes place in Skid Row, Los Angeles, which is one of the worst neighborhoods in LA. And this movie has an entire cast of characters that includes, murder detectives, greedy businessmen, prostitutes, the whole gambit. But every single character that has a speaking line is basically a Looney Tune. Like everything is just absurd to the nth degree. And one way that this movie really works is that it doesn't give you like a movie that doesn't have as much confidence in its concept would give the audience like a straight man or a serious character that they can empathize with that kind of has the absurdist comedy acted upon him or her. But this movie, every single person is just ridiculous. And perhaps the most ridiculous of all is Seymour, the main character, who is this kind of, bumbling, stereotypical, like, bumbling idiot who works at Mushnick's flower shop on Skid Row. Now, Mr. Mushnick is a, stereotypical kind of greedy businessman, and I think Mr. Mushnick's character is the one thing about this movie that doesn't really age well, because he's very, covetous and money grubbing, and essentially the joke is that he's a Jewish man, and his main character trait is like greed and want of money. So he'll say one thing and then money will come into the picture and he'll completely flip the script 2 seconds later. But honestly, it's not really played as, mean-spirited, other than just like that is his character, that is his defining character trait, from which the comedy around Mr. Mushnick is based, but it doesn't really come off as like intentionally mean or trying to be offensive. But Mr. Mushnick is ready to fire Seymour because he is a fuck up, basically. And he gives Seymour one last chance to make a plant grow in order to keep his job. And he wants to keep the job not only because he has to support his mother, but because his love interest, or the girl he likes, Audrey, also works at Mushnick's flower shop. Unfortunately for Seymour, Audrey Jr., which is what he names the plant that he's taking care of, can only survive if it's fed a steady diet of human blood. Now, at first, that's not much of a problem for Seymour because he just pricks his finger and lets the little like blood drops feed the plant while it's still tiny. But eventually, this becomes infeasible, and the plant is constantly demanding more and more food or more blood because the plant itself can talk. So, distraught, Seymour goes down to the railroad to throw rocks at trains because he's pissed off, and he manages to hit some random dude in the head with a rock and kill him, and which he then like feeds the body piece by piece to Audrey Jr. And this is just the first of a couple different murders that happen as the plant gets bigger and bigger, and Seymour, who has just been this perpetual fuck up for his entire life, is finally getting recognition, positive like praise from Mr. Mushnick. Audrey Senior, the real Audrey, starts going out with him, and everyone's really happy about this crazy plant that he's growing. But of course, the object of his success is eventually his downfall, because he ends up having to he kills a prostitute towards the end of the film, but the murder that happens between the random guy at the train tracks, and the prostitute is part of probably the most famous scene in this, where Seymour ends up killing his own dentist, and yet again another kind of like freak accident. But he doesn't have time to hide the body before another patient comes in to get his teeth drilled and yanked out. And this is, of course, the character of Wilberforce, which is played by an extremely young Jack Nicholson. Now, Jack Nicholson, and it's funny because Jack Nicholson, that we all know and love, his face is usually put like real big on any like DVD for this movie because they want to trick you into thinking he's a star, but he only appears in this one scene, and he is just egregiously young. I initially wrote down in my notes here that Jack Nicholson looks to be about 15, but in reality he was 23 when this movie came out in 1960. And this was only one of the first, it was like the third or fourth movie he had ever had a role in. I think his first film was back in 1958. So he'd only been acting for a few years, and his character is a masochist. He appears to derive like some thrill or sexual pleasure from getting his teeth like yanked out of his head and putting a drill, getting his teeth drilled through. But yeah, the rest of the movie after Jack Nicholson's cameo is basically Seymour losing control of his life as, Audrey Jr. demands more and more food, which eventually leads to ridiculous, like, Dick Tracy parody cop characters to hunt him down. And, of course, at the end of the movie, he gets his just desserts, or, his retribution for all the murders he accidentally bumbles into. Yeah, but overall, I really enjoyed this movie. If you're a fan of, like, dark humor and dark comedy, I'd definitely check this one out. Other than just the absurdism of everything, the dialogue is really snappy, and there's a lot of, like, clever jokes just hidden in this, like, real quick back and forth between these characters. So overall, a really enjoyable film, and I'd highly recommend it. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, hit that subscribe button to join the Basement Army, and if you have any recommendations of other movies you'd like me to review or think I'd like, please leave them in the comments below. I'll see y'all in the next one. Thank you.